Welcome in, fans, to another episode of the Two Line Pass podcast. I'm your host, Randon, here with my best bud, Dustin, and this podcast is all about the Utah Hockey Club, 6th in the Central, number 1 in our hearts. Dustin, it's been a heck of a week to come up. How you doing tonight?
I'm reading Don't Kill Yourself books. They're not mine. I'm holding them for a friend, but I picked it up. I looked at it. I'm struggling. I have rants in my head that I want to probably lay out at some point tonight. But other than that, things are okay. Your blog post really helped kind of center myself. Like, okay, this is where we thought we'd be. We thought we would be probably on the outside looking in. We just wanted a chance. We're coming down to the final 10 games of the season. They're not pointless. There is still hope. Outside shot as it may be, there is still hope. We're getting exactly what we wanted. Exactly what we wanted to come out of the season has come to bear, has risen from the ashes of the Coyotes, has bloomed some hope, but I'll be okay.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's funny you mentioned the Coyotes. We haven't seen success like this in quite some time since they left Arizona. So at the very least, right, this is tangible improvement season to season. And even if the end result doesn't exactly work out the way we wanted it, maybe we don't end up making the playoffs. It seems incredibly likely that we won't. It has still been a hell of a ride. I've enjoyed every episode hanging out with you, hanging out with the fans. I got to say, the fans and Utah Twitter is incredible. We have some of the best fans, not only of the podcast, but of the team. It's been a hell of a ride. And we're not done yet. We're not done yet, right? We're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. Now, it doesn't look good. Right? There's still Calgary, Vancouver, St. Louis ahead of us. St. Louis a full 8 points ahead of us, but they have played 2 more games. So, maybe they stop streaking and they start sucking like they did most of the season, and maybe we're talking about coming down the stretch. But it does, I will be honest, it seems unlikely that we jump Calgary, Vancouver, and St. Louis, but again, we're not mathematically eliminated, and success shouldn't necessarily be measured by the playoffs, even though we want it to be. This season, we knew that was a tall order, but this season has just been incredible. Expectations surpassed, as long as those expectations weren't the playoffs. And we come into this we're on the road again, an incredibly tough back-to-back against Tampa Bay and Florida. However, we did beat Tampa Bay at home just last week on Saturday, 6-4, granted against not the best goalie in the world, but against Tampa Bay nonetheless, right? And we gave them everything they could handle. We beat Buffalo in true Buffalo fashion, where it seems like maybe we don't control the game, but Buffalo collapses. We get 3 late goals and end up winning 5-2, and then drop a just devastating, soul-crushing loss to Detroit, which seemed like it just put the brakes on all the momentum we had when we lost to Detroit. The way we lost to Detroit, it was not even close, really. Dylan Guenther's goal was the highlight, but just once again, we're making backup goalies look like they're gods in net, and it is frustrating. It is frustrating to see, and so hopefully we come out of Florida, maybe they decide, hey, they're in playoff position, right? They don't need to try hard. It's just against the lowly Utah Hockey Club. And maybe we sneak out. That's in the roadmap that you posted on the Twitter.com, and it has to be like we talked about having to win them all, and maybe you don't have to win them all, but you got to win darn near every one of them.
Yeah, and that's what makes that loss to Detroit so hard. Because in that blog post, the roadmap blog post that I put up on twolinepass.com, I talked about like you're gonna beat Buffalo. You're gonna beat Detroit, and you're gonna beat Chicago, and then hopefully either to Tampa Bay or Florida, you at least get into overtime. Get an extra point there, add to that, like, versus what's expected. If you can steal a win, that's even better, obviously. What makes it so hard, what makes that loss to Detroit so difficult, is that now you almost have to go in and steal a game from either Tampa Bay or Florida, preferably both at this point. Those should have been like extra points versus what was expected. Like that should have been, all right, we got our points against Detroit. We're going to get our points against Chicago. Now these are bonus points. Like, that's just adding, that's pushing us up the ladder. That's just pushing us closer. And it feels like back on March 14th when Utah has a chance to tie for the second wildcard spot, and then they go and they lose to Seattle. Like, the team just isn't handling their business. And like you talked about that Buffalo game, ultimately the score winds up being 5-2, but the whole game, Buffalo's one of the worst teams in the NHL. Utah did not look like the better team. And they didn't do that against Detroit either. Like, Detroit playing, at least lately, coming into that game, they had lost 9 of their last 11, playing some of the worst hockey in the NHL. Very bad offensively. And Utah just didn't look like the better team. And I alluded after you asked me how I was doing, that I had a rant that I wanted to go on. And if you've been listening to this podcast, this is usually Randon's spot where he's going to rant about Rigney and the job that he's doing. But I feel like when you have a team that so consistently plays down to the level of their competition, that doesn't look better than the teams they are clearly better than, that falls on coaching. That is a coach who's not motivating his players. You know, like, if you're listening to the sound of my voice, you're probably in Utah and you've grown up a Jazz fan. There was a situation, I don't even know if I should call it a situation, but a scenario back in 2014 where the Jazz were just kind of like methodically going through the motions, just not playing up to stuff, not playing with any passion, not playing with any sense of urgency. And Quinn Snyder goes to the table where players check in and out of the game and yells, like full-on angry dad yells at Rudy Gobert and Trey Burke, like, "Wake up!" Like, yells over and over, like, "Wake up! Wake the hell up!" And, like, motivates them. At that point, they were down 12. After that, immediately cut the deficit down to 2. Like, Quinn Snyder knew how to motivate his team, what they needed, when they needed to be yelled at, and when they didn't need to be yelled at. There's also a time where Quinn Snyder took a timeout to just stare at his players. He didn't say a word to him the whole damn timeout. Just stares at them. And Quinn Snyder, if you're familiar with what he looks like, the dude looks like a serial killer. And that dude just angry staring at you like just, "Oh, I'm going to kill you guys." Like, he knew what his team needed when they needed it. And I don't know that Turney does. Like, this team so consistently over and over and over, and it's the reason we're more than likely going to miss out on the playoffs, plays down to the level of their competition. And there are losses out there to like Seattle, Chicago, San Jose, where we blew, what was it, a 4-goal lead in the third? Like, consistently dropping these points. And like, that's 6 points right there. Where's Utah sitting if they don't drop those games? Sorry, 5 points, because I believe that San Jose game went to overtime and they lost. So that only lost 1 point. But still, that's 5 points that would be great for Utah right now. And they rarely look like clearly the better team when they're playing some of the lower teams in the league.
No, you're absolutely right. And Turney is one of those coaches who's very good at the coach speak. You know, he gets asked questions, he deflects the questions, he never gives a straight answer, which a lot of coaches don't. But there are some that do, and there are some that give very straightforward answers, and it, to me, shows a level of accountability that Turney's never had to show. He has never had to coach a team that has had to be held accountable. And I think that's been to his detriment because they haven't had any expectations, right? We opened the show with my monologue about we didn't really have expectations and the playoffs were a great hope, but that wasn't really what we were going to measure success on. But that's all Turney's coached. This team has never had any measure of tangible, like, what does a successful season look like? And he's never had to be accountable and marginal improvement, right? 7th, 6th. That's the record. That's assuming we don't collapse and Anaheim jumps us. Because then it would be 7-7, 7-7, right? I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he has technically improved, but it's basically been flatline improvement, and Turney just hasn't had that spark. I'll tell you, Dustin, I was at a minor league hockey game of the Utah Grizzlies, right? And I forget who the coach was because this was years ago, and I wonder, maybe it was Austin Collie, or I can't even remember, but it was a classic case of, I'm going to throw equipment on the ice. I'm going to throw sticks on the ice. I'm going to throw gloves on the ice. Anything I can find, I'm going to throw it on the ice. And it was a Class A temper tantrum, but I loved it. As a fan, that you don't get to see that very often. But it also showed, because it was obviously as a result of a bad call on the ice or something. It wasn't just that his team got scored on, right? Like, obviously there was something wrong with the officiating. And he basically showed his team, look, we're not going to take it anymore, right? And I'm willing to take the game misconduct, the fine, the suspension, whatever comes along with it, to show you guys that I have your back. And I don't even think I've heard Turney say a word to an official. I don't think I've ever seen him react to a bad call more than just shaking his head. He's never called the officials over for an explanation. He's never given them an earful, not that I've seen at least. Not that they've put on the broadcast that I can remember. If anybody can, I would love to see it. I would love to see Turney mad, because there have been plenty of times, I'm looking at the checks to Logan Cooley specifically, where we talk about, the fight again, who stood up for him. I forget who it was. Maybe, I don't think it was McBain.
McBain? You're
McBain?
Talking. I'm thinking about McBain after the Kerfoot hit.
Yeah, no. So Cooley gets.
But there was an issue there was a couple of games ago where Cooley took a hit and Keller stepped up for him.
Yeah, if what we're thinking of, if it's when Keller literally dumps the puck into the offensive zone to turn around, like, I thought it was cool, but I was also mad at Keller for turning away an offensive chance to go stand up for Cooley when there's been plenty of other opportunities to do so. But that's the captain, and he hasn't really shown like much like, I'm going to yell at the officials, and maybe we're past that, right? Maybe we're past that, but I'm just romanticizing the Tortorella yelling at the other coach, yelling at the bench, and I want to see that passion, because that to me shows that this team, we know they care, right? They say that they care. We believe them when they say that they care, and they play hard. But I do want to see, when there's frustrations, like, show us. I want to see it, not just in the post game and say, oh yeah, we didn't do what we supposed to, but if we stick to the game plan, put pucks in the back of the net, things are going to go right. We just stick to the game plan, right? Like, no. It wasn't Kerfoot. I want to say it was Ian Cole who was asked. This was months ago, back in the slumps of November and December, and he was basically like, I don't know how many more times we have to go over what we do wrong. Eventually, we have to fix it. And it was a moment of refreshing honesty for this team to hold themselves accountable. And granted, they got much better. Now, they got some guys back from injury. I don't think that moment was a catalyst. But all that to say is, yes, I just don't know that Turney has what it takes to motivate his players to exceed expectations when the expectations aren't literally the bare minimum. And I put it in the blog post, starting next season, regardless of whether we get Mitch Marner or some big name free agency, which, there's not too many out, like Mitch Marner's the get. But even if you just go out there and improve your team, the expectation starting next season has to be playoffs or bust.
It's playoffs or nothing.
Yeah. We're not like there was. So did you? I don't know if you heard some. Mike Folta, the radio guy, had a great bit about when we're playing Detroit, how Detroit was basically Utah's ghost of Christmas future, and that Detroit as a franchise is what happens when a rebuild goes wrong. And our rebuild is not going wrong. Our rebuild is going perfectly. It will take catastrophic errors from Bill Armstrong to mess this up, and I don't think he's going to from a personnel standpoint. He has his guys. He continues to draft well. Our up-and-coming guys will keep us stocked for the next 3 to 4 years. And then we have the cap space to bring guys in. So what does that leave other than personal accountability on the ice? And that's accountability on the bench. And Turney's got to show that he's the guy, because he gets next season, and it's a short leash, in my opinion, a very short leash.
If you start next year like Edmonton did last year, you have to pull the plug. Edmonton did the same thing. They went into the season with a coach that they were sort of unsure about, and the season got off to a really, really, really bad start. And we have the talent on this team. We have talent. We should be winning. Out. You fire the coach, and then they go to the Stanley Cup Finals. They did the exact same thing. And if you start next year with Tourigny at the helm of this ship, guiding this ship, he gets the shortest of short leashes, because if you start off bad, it needs to be fixed immediately, especially if you go out and like make a big signing with if you do bring in Mitch Marner and you bring in that caliber of player, like you are set. That's no longer a fringe playoff roster. That is looking towards like, we don't even need the wild card. Like, we're just going to get into the playoffs level talent on that team. And if it gets off to a bad start, you cannot sit and wait around. Obviously, I hope they just, if he's still here next year, I hope they just find success. Maybe you find success, you make it to the playoffs, and it's not a question. Because I never feel good rooting for somebody to get fired. This is people's livelihoods. I don't ever want to see people get fired. I don't want to see people lose their jobs. So I would much rather him just figure it out and take this team to where they need to go. But you cannot just sit around and wait and say like, okay, well, we'll give you a little bit more time. You got to figure it out. Like, no, like that talent needs to be in the playoffs. So I just,
Yep.
Really, I was doing some research pre-show research. That was a lot harder to say than it should have been. But when I did my first like roadmap, I did it on the pod, and I talked about Utah, Vancouver, and Calgary. Because, obviously looking back now, it's stupid now that St. Louis is in the driver's seat and more than likely going to finish in that wildcard spot. But at that point, we recorded that February 20th, and their next 6 games were Washington, Los Angeles, Dallas, Los Angeles, Anaheim, and Los Angeles. And I looked at that and I said, okay, they're 4th out of 4 teams, and that is a murderer's row stretch of 6 games. Like, the easiest game there is Anaheim, and that's on the road after 4 really tough games. And they went out and they go win, win, loss, win, win, overtime loss. Out of a possible 12 points, they got 9 of it. So that boosts them right up. And then now they're in the midst of a 7-game winning streak. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about Utah not winning the games that they're supposed to, is because the 7-game win streak, they've beaten Minnesota and Vancouver, but in there they have Anaheim, Nashville twice, Chicago. It hasn't been a rough stretch of games to go on a 7-game winning streak because they're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. And in that same stretch, Utah has lost to Chicago. They've lost to Seattle. Now they've lost to Detroit. Like, those are 3 games that Utah should be winning. And that is the difference between a team like St. Louis, who is going to make the playoffs. I'll just say it right now. They're going to win. They have the easiest schedule down the stretch. The way that they're playing like one of the best teams in the NHL. They're going to the playoffs. It's going to be St. Louis. And they're doing it because they're beating the teams that they're supposed to beat. That's where you win and lose. That's how you make the playoffs. You beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. You lose to the teams that you're supposed to lose to, and then maybe you steal most of the games against the teams that you're like on the same playing field with, and then every once in a while steal a game from like the Winnipeg and Washington, which Utah has done. They're just losing to the teams that they're supposed to beat, and that's why we're going to miss the playoffs. Because St. Louis isn't. And that feels like a coaching thing. Because St. Louis and Utah, in my mind, have very similar rosters in terms of talent. Like, they both have probably, in terms of talent, they're about on equal footing. So where's the difference? It's probably coaching. And I will settle for what we've had this year. Because like we said, it's what we expected. But next year is absolutely playoffs or bust. And you cannot get any length into the season if you start off poorly. Like, if you start the way that Utah did to start the season, okay, cool, you're winning 3 straight. But then if you start going loss, win, and then lose 4 straight, and all of a sudden you're 4-4-2, like, this isn't going to cut it. We can't keep doing this. We have to be like, what's that line that everybody says? What's it, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. That's what Torini's time in Arizona/Utah has been. The same thing over and over and over and over. This is the first year he's had the talent. He's obviously received an influx of talent, and it looks like the return on that is one notch higher in the standings. And it needs to be better than that.
St. Louis is, 13-3-3 since the Four Nations break. And you talk about those 6 points that we dropped against winnable games. If Utah picks up those 6 points, we're talking about Utah being 2 games back of the second wild card with 2 games in hand. That is awesome, right? That's where we're wanting to be. Instead, we're 8 points back with 2 games in hand, with a much more difficult stretch of games coming up. And it is extremely frustrating because, like you said, we're about even with St. Louis. But if you look at Calgary, St. Louis, and Vancouver, there is not a single inclination to me that their rosters are better than ours. They are not significantly better teams, and we are not somehow so overachieving that we shouldn't be. Like, we should absolutely be there. We should absolutely be there. And with the people you're going to bring in next year, you have to get there, right? And we're going to say it multiple times next year. We have to get there because the expectations, I want all the fans out there. Like, I'm sorry, the rebuild is over. Like, the rebuild is over. But if it's not, Dustin, if the rebuild is not over, let me ask you this. Let me ask you a fan, because you're a Utah Jazz fan. Can the state of Utah handle back-to-back tanks in 2 separate sports? If Utah were to tank, because there's a very, very talented reason, an extremely talented reason to tank in next year's draft, not this upcoming one, but the next year, could the state of Utah handle back-to-back tanks from both the Jazz and the hockey club?
In order for the hockey club to tank next season, they're going to have to offload a lot of talent. There's too much talent in Utah to tank. Like, I don't even think if you try, like if Armstrong pulled Turini aside and he said, hey, we don't want to be good this year, like, sabotage the season. There's too much talent on the roster to be able to tank. But hell, at one point, the hockey club was so bad at home that the Utah Hockey Club had the worst home record in the NHL, and the Utah Jazz had the worst home record in the NBA. So the Delta Center was far and away the worst mecca of sports in the entire country. Just nobody won here. I don't think people can handle it. I don't think without one, since they go concurrently, since they're going at the same time, I don't think the state of Utah can handle it. I think people would be up in arms. I think there would be riots in the streets. People would be drinking their swigs, their dirty Diet Cokes, staying up all night and protesting in front of City Hall. Just way too much going on for both teams to tank. But on the plus side, I don't see that happening because Utah just has too much talent to be bad.
All right, I'm tank for Gavin McKenna. But a lot of teams are. Can you imagine the storyline if Utah, the newest franchise, gets a guy like Gavin McKenna? Like, they're saying he's the next great one, you know? He's up there with the expectations, better than Bedard, better than Celebrini, you know? So, but you're absolutely right. Even if we tried to tank, it would be too obvious that we were tanking. So, but, you know, maybe the injury bug bites us, not putting that out there. I don't want to put that out there just to get this Gavin McKenna, because even if you're the worst team in the league, you still only have like a 1 in 5 chance of getting him. And if we're like 16th worst, we have a 1 in 100. So I like those odds. You're telling me there's a chance for Gavin McKenna. But speaking of prospects, we just called up Kyler Yamamoto. So there was some concern on Twitter about possible injuries, but there is a rule in the NHL. So after the trade deadline, you are not limited to 23 rostered players. As long as you are under the cap, you can have a roster of as many guys as you want. So obviously the Yamamoto coming up, he's played most of the year in the AHL. You know, he played a couple of games early in the season and some preseason games, but most of the time in the NHL or in the AHL. Just giving him a look, right? A guy who, you know, trying to decide if he fits long term and with this team perhaps, but you're likely not to see O'Brien for the rest of the year. So, get a couple of depth guys, but he'll be fun to watch. He creates a lot of interest. The state of Utah really likes him, but I would like to see Maverick Lamoureux come back. And I know he's had his discipline problems, but if it is the case, like let's say we lose to Tampa Bay, lose to Florida, pretty much the race is done, right? If we lose both of those games, I think we can agree playoffs are out of reach entirely. So bring him up. Let's see what the development has got it, because we did it with Josh Doan, and it was phenomenal. Nobody can say that the Josh Doan going to the AHL and coming back was anything other than a success. Now, was that his development in the AHL, or was that just him rising to his potential? But Maverick Lamoureux has a lot of potential, and he does have the chance to factor in a big way, not only in the short-term plans, but the long-term future of this team. So when we talk about reasons to stay engaged for the rest of the season, even with the playoffs out, watching some of our young guys that have spent some time in the AHL, I say bring them up. Get them a game or two. Just see where they're at, right? Worst case scenario, you can just send them right back down because they're two-way players. They're waiver exempt. So just bring them up. See where we've got, You would want to pair him maybe with Ian Cole, but maybe Ian Cole gets a break,
I was going to say, Ian Cole has seemingly dedicated himself to going to the penalty box 2 or 3 times a game lately. So, if that was Maverick Lamoureux's shortcoming, you're not losing anything if the name on the back of the jersey who's skating to the box says Lamoureux instead of Cole. What are you losing? Other than the fact that you're giving some playing time to a young guy versus an older veteran who you brought here to be like a veteran piece who's probably not part of the future plans of this team. So get the young guy some experience, as long as Cole's just going to seemingly dedicate himself to going to the box as many times as possible like Lamoureux did when he was here.
I'm saying it would work, and especially if there's if the playoffs are out of reach and you still want to play meaningful hockey, getting your young guys that time is meaningful hockey, because you've got Lamoureux that needs to come up. You've got a lot of young guys, Simashev may make the jump. I don't know if he plays in the AHL, but he's coming to America next year. So you have to start giving him some looks going down. Now, with some of the injuries to, our young guys, Iginla, to be precise, I don't think he is Cooley-esque in that he comes in his second year. He'll probably stay another year or two in the minors, but you've got people who are going to play, and Lamoureux is one of them. I say bring him up. If you're going to give Kyler Yamamoto a look, you might as well give Lamoureux a look, right? You've got some expendable forwards that you can bench a little easier than defensemen, but at this point, just give him the ice time. See where we're at, right? See where we're at with him. Has the time in the AHL helped? What else do we need to do? And then show me that it is Turney who everyone says he's this developmental coach. Well, I haven't seen it. I've seen him take people who already had superstar potential and they turn out to be superstars, but I haven't seen him take middle-of-the-road players and make them great. I really haven't, and I would like to see that, because right now, Maverick Lamoureux has a lot of growing pains, and I would like to see our head coach be the one to do it, not the AHL guy. Otherwise, bring the AHL guy up, who I think, coincidentally, is Austin Collie, who used to be the coach of the I was going to say, Grizzlies. So don't do that. Don't do that.
Talk about bringing everything full circle. Our crack research team here at Two Line Pass told us that Kevin Collie, who you were talking about, the coach who threw things on the ice, that was January 17th, 2011 against the Stockton Thunder. Our crack research team here at the Two Line Pass found that out as you were talking, but never had a chance to bring it up. That happens a lot, to where I'm like, ooh, I want to say this, and I as you're talking, I'm doing my research off to the side, okay, we're going to talk about this, and then I find it, and then I don't have a natural way to work it in. I'm like, oh, well, that's just a piece of information that's lost to the ether. So it happened there. It happened there. And then also, now I'm going to force my way. I'm just going to shoehorn my research and my comments into this. But going back to where you were talking about tanking, and they say that this guy's the next great one. This guy's the next phenom. We're gonna tank for that guy, and we'll be set. This is what I always think about when people talk about like right now the NBA is tanking for flag, and there's always somebody that you're tanking for. Back in the day, there was an issue of Slam magazine, a basketball magazine, And on the front page, the cover of that magazine is LeBron James, the king, the GOAT, the great one, whatever you want to call him. And the headline says, "The Takeover, LeBron James and this other person standing next to him on the magazine cover are about to rule the world." Imagine that. So LeBron James definitely rules the world of basketball, has for a very long time. The other person who's on the magazine cover standing shoulder to shoulder with him, who's also going to rule the world because he was a young phenom, Sebastian Telfair. You know who the hell that guy is? Of course you don't. He played for the Portland Trailblazers at one point. That's all I know about him because he never panned out, even though he was supposed to be like one of the next big ones. He's going to rule the world, the next big thing in basketball. That's what I think about when people say, like, they're the next great one. Tank for that one. You pick them up. You're going to build something special. You know, the Jazz fans talk about it right now. Like, we're following the San Antonio Spurs model because they had Tim Duncan, and then they tank for, or they had Robinson, then they tank for Tim Duncan. Twin Towers just swatting everybody's shots away. You can't score on them. They go out and win NBA titles. They're like, yeah, we're following that. We already have our young core guys. Now we're tanking for Flag, and we're going to get him, and we're going to be set, and we're going to be winning titles in a couple of years. That completely neglects the fact that those people have to translate at the next level. Like, it's really easy playing youth hockey and college hockey to look really, really good. But then you get up into the pros, the AHL and the NHL, and the game just gets better and better and better. And then all of the people, like, you're used to being the best player on the ice, all of a sudden, you're probably not even the best player on your roster on your side of the ice. You're no longer just completely dominating everybody athletically. And I'm getting off the rails right now. St. Louis is beating the teams that they need to beat. Utah is not. I'm just going to cut myself off before I go on an ADHD-riddled rant that starts talking about different sports and all this bullshit. Sebastian Telfair didn't turn into anything.
I like it. I say rant away. Also, as I'm ranting, was I saying Austin Collie? I think I was, instead of Kevin Collie. But
No, I think maybe you said it once. I know you said Kevin Collie, because I was like, okay, Kevin Collie, and it made me think of Austin Collie. But maybe the second time around, maybe you said Austin Collie.
Yeah,
good old Mr. Magic happens, but I rooted for that guy in the NFL. He was really good in the NFL as a slot receiver. But unfortunately, he played for Peyton Manning, who loves throwing hospital balls to his receivers and just wound up taking too many cracks to the head.
Well, what can you do? Now he's on commercials and he's got his Monday Night Football crap. Anyway, this is not a football podcast, not until the fall at least. But
it could be. I love talking football.
We'll have some
maybe we should start. Maybe we should start like in the 2-line pass off season. We can turn it into a football podcast.
We will. We absolutely will, because there's a lot to talk about, a lot of excitement coming up in the state of Utah for football. But we digress. Also, it turns out that Kevin Collie is not the head coach of the Tucson Roadrunners. Some chump Steve Potvin is, and he does not seem good. So that's not the again. Bring your young guys up. Let's see where it goes. But 11 games left. It's going to be some fun ones. We've got back-to-back games, which will be the airing of this episode, will be tonight against the Tampa Bay Lightning and then against the Florida Panthers. So the guys enjoying some Florida sun. Dustin, before we go, do you have any closing thoughts? Any other rants you'd like to go on?
The Tampa Bay Lightning tomorrow, coached by Utah's next head coach, John Cooper. That Tampa Bay Lightning team. But this is what I want to say. I'm not going to give up hope. I am eternally, hope springs eternal inside me. I will believe that we can make the playoffs until we are completely eliminated. And then there will still be a voice in the back of my head that's like, they can still go back and retroactively take away points for the Blues for breaking rules, and so maybe we can still sneak in there and we'll beat the Blues on in game 82, and we'll sneak in there. We'll just eke our way into the playoffs. Like, even after we're mathematically eliminated, there's gonna be like a little voice that's like, maybe they can figure something out. Maybe they did the math wrong. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But I would like, if we do lose to Tampa Bay and Florida, I would like to see them put Maverick into the lineup, because at that point, we're probably not making them playoffs. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we're almost mathematically eliminated, barring it would take like Utah winning every game and then all 3 teams losing all of theirs. And then the game after that is Chicago, and you can probably win that with Maverick Lambrou in the lineup, even though you lost that game on the 7th already. So I would like to see that. I would like to see if the team does lose these next 2 in regulation, they don't get any points from it, just make that change. Just completely pivot towards, all right, next year we're building, we're moving forward. We're already on the phone with Mitch Marner. We're setting that up. So like the day free agency opens, we're bringing him in. Just I want this fight, this push to the wild card spot to go as far into the next 10, 11 games, however many we have left. I want it to go as deep into the season as it can, because games just mean more when there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So you asked for a small last thought. I gave you another Ritalin-fueled ADHD rant, which I'm just making the tone, the theme of this episode. So Dustin Rants is what we should call this one, I guess.
You know what? I'm here for it. I could listen to you rant all day, and I think our fans
Well, I hope our fans can. I hope our subscribers can, because I gave them their goddamn money's worth in rants tonight.
Now we'll cut them into little bite-sized pieces for you as well, once I get off my lazy editing butt. But we'll get it out there for you. One thing I want to see, guys, I want to see Stauber the Stopper coming into Florida and getting another shutout. He blanked the Vegas Golden Knights.
Vegas.
I would love to see him blank the Panthers. I hope he plays against them.
No, I wanna see him play tomorrow, by the airing of this tonight, against Tampa Bay, because there were so many Tampa Bay fans on Twitter talking about, oh, that win doesn't even count because we had our AHL goalie in net. Start Stauber against Tampa Bay, let him beat them, and then you just throw that shit right back in their faces. Like, our win didn't count because we played the guy that you called up from the AHL. Who did you just lose to? That's right, Jackson, the Stauber from the AHL, called up because Connor Ingram had to go to the assistance program, whipped your ass. AHL goalies are not an excuse. Fraud. Yeah, sure, they've been the best franchise in the last 8 years. Who gives a shit? Fraudulent franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we beat them so bad, they're so distraught, they fire John Cooper, and we get him this upcoming season.
See this what is the guy, what's his name, Face from the A team saying, I love it when a plan comes together. This is the plan. This is how you do it. Stauber and net against the Lightning, beat them, embarrass the franchise, get their coach fired, bring him here, sign Mitch Marner, Stanley Cup in Utah within 2 years.
Boom! You heard it here first, guys. Hey, I'm Randon. Dustin with me as always. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Come visit the website, twolinepass.com. You can hear all the episodes, see all the episodes, read all the blog posts. Also catch us on Twitter at the Two Line Pass. Guys, we love hearing from you. We love that you guys are participating. We love this fan base. Go Utah Hockey Club, and everybody have a great night.